Hey, welcome to another live show. And with me, of course, is Brian Ross Kelly from Atlanta. And Brian, what topic should we dive into first today?
Well, I think the topic on everybody's mind today is the reveal of the 2023 Acura Integra, which I didn't know it was coming out today. I knew the reservations were opening up today. I was kind of surprised to see they unveiled the thing in full today. You said you kind of knew that was coming, but yeah, it was cool to see it all.
Let me see if I can pull up a picture here. Will you
Yep.
tell everybody basically what the Integra is in the Acura lineup?
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead and start that, and I will. Here we go. I found a picture.
All right.
See if I can share it here.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously the Acura Integra hasn't been in the lineup for many years now. The ILX could kind of be considered, when it was available, its spiritual successor, but this is the real deal. This is the new version. Obviously, it looks very similar to the prototype we saw at the end of last year. And my initial thoughts are the same as I had originally. I think it looks really good, but clearly, based on seeing the interior, seeing the specs, seeing everything about it today, it's sticking to its roots. It's a fancier Acura version of the Civic. And I
Yep.
don't think that's a bad thing. I know you agree with me on that.
I agree with you on that one. I kind of ranted because I know a few people in the industry, and it was funny because I posted this on Facebook, and a whole bunch of people said, "Oh my goodness, as a viewer, I'm sorely feel it." And I said, "Well, are you feeling guilty?" It was aimed at journalists, who largely, journalists, we tend to be enthusiasts, obviously, but there was this expectation that somehow it would be different, and it would be, I don't know what they were thinking, to be honest, but yeah, like you said, it's always been a luxury Civic, and I
Right.
think there's zero wrong with that because that's true to Acura's roots. The Integra was always good value, premium vehicle, better dealer experience, longer warranty, fun to drive, and most importantly, affordable. And if they had done anything different with the Integra, it wouldn't have been affordable, and it wouldn't have been an Integra.
Right, right. And I know some people are concerned that it's not a two-door, but no one's buying two doors. So
Exactly. No one's
it made more sense.
No one's buying two doors. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So that part, I will give them a tiny bit saying, well, it's not the real deal because it's not a two door. But
Right.
yeah,
But
you
there was
wouldn't.
always, correct me if I'm wrong, there was a four-door Integra in the past, so it's not like it's completely.
I
Um,
believe so, but I'm sure someone will correct us.
yeah.
Somehow I was not into Acuras when the Integra existed at the
Mhm,
time.
mhm.
Um, that somehow shows my age there. But I remember vividly the birth of Acura.
Mm. See, to age me, I remember the birth of Scion over at Toyota,
Oh,
but
okay.
I was little and I was like, Scion? What is that? But
Yeah.
yeah, but there are a couple of
Everything was
few things
first.
to point out about the Integra that I noticed that are different from the rest of the Acura lineup. And the
Mhm.
first thing that I noticed is in the interior, they're not giving us that touchpad interface. It's basically the
Yes.
same
See if
Civic
I can find an
interface.
interior shot here.
Yeah, let's
Here
pull
we
that up
go.
again. Yeah, it's a very similar interior design to the Civic. No touchpad. It looks like the interface is pretty much just a sort of slightly modified version of what the Civic and most of the other Honda products currently get. And I don't know if people are really going to be too upset about that because that touchpad system is not everyone's favorite. I know it's not your favorite. I don't hate it, but it is not the most intuitive thing, especially if you're actively driving the car.
Yeah, it
So
doesn't bother me. Let me look at this photo, the Civic's infotainment system. I think it's fine.
right.
And you can get a bigger screen than you can on the Civic. You can get the 9-inch screen.
Mhm, mhm.
It's the same steering wheel with an Acura logo. It's the same instrument cluster with new software.
Mhm.
It's the same climate control knobs with slightly different air vents above. But
Yeah.
this goes back to the what did you think it was going to be to anybody that thought it was going to be different? Because that's the wrong car company if that's what you were thinking of.
Right, right,
And
right, right.
it's $8,000 less than a Mercedes CLA.
And that thing's small. Well, yeah, probably smaller because this has got that more of a hatchback design in the
Yeah.
rear. So I
This is
imagine rear seat space is a little bit better than a CLA.
Yeah, Honda didn't disclose any
Mhm.
any interior dimensions, but it should be largely like a Civic. So that means BMW 3 Series like interior room. And on the outside, this is actually much closer to a 3 Series in size than an Audi A3. The Audi A3 is considerably smaller, and all of the options are going to be more expensive than this.
Right, right. And another thing that I noticed is some people were hoping that the model that we're going to be, getting first would have super handling all-wheel drive optional, and there's no mention of that anywhere. So it looks like the standard Integra, if there is a Type S coming later, there's potential for that to get it, and I imagine it would get it, but the standard Integra is not getting super handling all-wheel drive as an option.
Yep.
So.
And I will dash your hopes there and say that the Civic platform was not designed for all-wheel drive, so
Right.
it is unlikely that the Integra will get all-wheel drive.
Right.
And I know a lot of people have been, upset about that as well. But the reality is, every new car company has to build low-volume products to be profitable, and Acura products are, by their luxury brand nature, lower volume than the appropriate Honda product. The corollary there. So, I mean, ILX has been the best seller in the segment. 2020 and 2021, it outsold 2 Series, it outsold CLA, it outsold A-Class, it outsold A3, and it outsold Lexus UX for some portion of the time as well. So the ILX, people love to hate on. It sold. The ILX is the formula that shoppers seem to be interested in, especially the price tag. And I think that's clearly why Acura went the direction they did with the Integra, is they needed to keep that price tag low.
And it's funny you said that, because I will say I've seen so many of the they've had 2 refreshes of the ILX, but the most recent refresh with the Acura Precision Concepts nose that all the new models have, I've seen so many of those around here, like more of those than any of the old ones. So I mean, I guess that design really clicked with people, and the value still is a really good reason to pick it. And there's another thing that I have seen comments about the Integra versus the ILX. That kind of, it is interesting. So the interior of the ILX, that was a completely different interior from the Civic it was based on. So people are like, well, why didn't they do that for this Integra? And again, they did a lot of other things with it that I think they offset the cost in other ways. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that part?
I'm just kind of okay with everything that Acura did. They haven't given us an upper price range, mind you, but the widely assumed price range is going to be $30,000 to $35,000 or $36,000. So that means even the most expensive way you can configure an Integra, it's still going to be significantly less than the base price of the smallest Mercedes in the US, etc. So I actually think they hit the nail right on the head with this. And if you have wanted a Civic Si for its performance and you want a CVT, then there's this, because it has the SI's engine.
Right. And then of course the other cool part about it is they are offering the manual transmission, but they're only offering it on the tech package of the A-Spec trim, which is the top trim. So I mean, that's probably the only place people are really going to go for it anyway. I mean, not many people are buying manuals, so they thought, we're going to give it to the people who really want one really bad, so they're going to pay a little bit more for it, and that's, at least they're doing it.
Yeah, this seems like this is another area where, like, the enthusiast is complaining, but the enthusiast doesn't buy new cars. These are the people that say, well, I like it because my Integra has a manual transmission and I keep my cars for 30 years and I always buy them used. And the answer to them is, this car is not for you. This car is for someone that buys a brand new entry-level luxury car. And if you want a manual, be thankful that it has one. And since manuals are very low volume, and this is going to sell at incredibly low volume, Acura is probably going to lose money on every manual transmission Integra they sell. So you got to put it at the very high end of the range to try and recoup as much of that as possible. It's just simple math.
Right. And again, this is the first of a ton of new products coming from Honda this year. I mean, obviously we just drove the Type S MDX, and then this is coming out, and we'll be probably driving that in a couple months or so, and then all those Honda things coming out. So this is a big year for them, and I think this is a pretty good start. It's a good kickoff to get things going. But I like it. I'm happy it's happening. So
yeah, I find that a lot of since we decided to talk about Acura sort of as well here, I find a lot of the commentary circling around Acura's falling apart, Acura's lost the plot, etc., is mainly wishful thinking, people wanting Acura to be something different than they have ever been. And Acura has not been as upfront, but like Nissan's pretty upfront with Infiniti lately that this is going to be Nissan Plus, that this is, luxury vehicles with good value, etc., because they're heavily based on Nissans. And Acura has sometimes separated their vehicles more than that, but this is still the basis of their business, is making a value-driven luxury entry vehicle that focuses on fun to drive, value, and a good price tag. It's that's what you get. If you want something else, then you have to be willing to pay for it.
Right. And, speaking of the value play, so obviously we just put out the video and the review or first drive review of the MDX Type S. And some people might say it's a little too expensive for what you get, or some people might say it's the
Mhm.
right price. I think I think you and I both agree on this. It's in the right spot. It could be a little bit less money, but not, honestly, it could, I think it's priced pretty well compared to an X5 that's going to be similarly powered, but
Mhm.
that's going to be a little bit, similar dynamics, maybe a
Yeah.
little bit different in terms of interior quality, but I think the overall package was really good.
Yeah, it is tricky. I mean, it's like I agree that the Type S MDX, I mean, it's a flagship for the brand, so
Mhm.
there's something for Acura to show there in that
Right.
respect. But yeah, its price tag is suspiciously close to a lot of other options in the segment, and so you
Mhm.
have to really convince yourself that value is where you want to go. Um, I think MDX Type S is a trickier sell. It's fun, but for me, Integra, that's an easy sell. It's only $3,000 more than a Civic Si with more feature content on it and a longer warranty. Like, what's not to go for?
Right. The concept itself of the Integra is something that like I would consider buying. And when we were at the event, I told some of the engineers that I was like, look, the Integra, I'm so glad you're doing it because this is definitely the kind of car for someone my age who likes to have a fun to drive car with a lot of features and not, something that's not super expensive. So I mean,
Mhm.
again, it's a good thing that they brought it back, I think.
Yeah. So let's move on to some of the questions here. And I would say, everybody be sure and hit comments down there in the comment section. And let us know if there is a particular time of the week and time of the day that's better for all of you, because we've been trying to experiment about different times of the week for the live show, earlier in the day, later in the day. The question of should we try a weekend? I'm not sure how well that would go over with the audience, but you can all sound off down there as well. This question I think is interesting. Why did Acura get rid of the sport hybrid system? The logical reason I think that it ended was because the NSX had a limited time frame left. And then they just no longer had as many vehicles to spread it out on. So you notice it was in the MDX and it was in the RLX.
Mhm.
And then the same motor unit was used in the NSX. And now the NSX is going bye-bye.
Mhm.
The sport hybrid system also sort of failed to live up to some of its potential, and Acura has really been trying to reduce costs. It required a different transmission. It was a unique dual clutch transmission in the MDX. In order to house that system, they decided to focus all their R&D efforts on their new 10-speed automatic transmission. So I wouldn't be surprised if some form of hybridization happened at some point later down the road. I don't know whether it will be that hybrid system specifically, regurgitated for those vehicles. Acura also has said that their electrification push, they've been upfront on this part, at least publicly, that their electrification push coming soon is going to be their electric vehicles.
Hmm. Yeah, and the first example of that will be the Prologue, which
Right.
is the GM partnership vehicle, I believe. I think
Mhm.
that's the one, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be
So
the
that'll have the
Ultium.
Ultium battery technology. It should be pretty interesting to see what that turns out to look like, or what body style they end up doing with that. Because the original Prologue is, I can't even. That was a coupe, wasn't it? I mean, I'm too young to remember that one.
Yeah, it's been a while. Smiles, I didn't say choose the Lexus. I said choose something else. So,
Hmm.
because UX is a very similar theme to the Integra. UX is Prius drivetrain or Corolla drivetrain. And you get what you pay for. So, I would definitely keep that one in mind. This is a good one that we talked about before the show, Brian. So, saving which EVs are a good buy here.
Yeah, so I have a couple in mind. I mean, obviously, like you've mentioned here, the Tesla Model S. I'm going to sort of start by talking with that one, or not Tesla Model S, Model 3, just because that's the one everyone's getting those. Everyone wants the Tesla Model 3, but that's going to be the baseline for what I talk about
Mhm.
because you can go less than that. You can get a much less expensive
Yep.
electric car right now. But with the Model 3, you can get into those for like $46,500. That's before the federal tax credits.
Oh,
But
it
that's
doesn't
a
apply to
real.
Lexus.
Oh, it
Or
doesn't
sorry,
apply
it
anymore.
doesn't apply to Tesla because they ran out.
They run out. So yeah,
Yeah.
46,490 is the entry level price for a single motor for one of those, and that's like 267 miles of range. So there are a lot
I
of
do
other
have to
options
ask,
that
is
are right
that
there in the 250 to 270 mile range category that are a lot less, including the Hyundai Kona EV. Now,
yep.
Kona EVs are much smaller. If you don't need too much cargo space, this is actually a decent option. And they're very efficient. If you actually look at, miles per gallon equivalent, that's about 120 miles per gallon equivalent, and they start at $34,000. And that's 258 miles of range out of those you can get. And they just refreshed it for 2022. So it's got a little bit of a nicer interior. And I'm sure, not right now because of the whole, the market's insane and everything, but normally I feel like they would give you might be able to find good deals on those because of the newer electric cars, Hyundai and Kia are coming out in a normal world, but we're clearly not living in that right now. So, but that's a really good option. And according to Autoblog, if you were to get a Kona EV, you'd only spend $550 a year filling it up with electricity.
Pretty much all the EVs that are currently on sale in the US right now, you're going to be spending less than $700 a year for pretty much any of them.
Right.
And plug-in hybrids, actually, for the vast majority, that counts too. It's the EPA has a recent list out of all the plug-in hybrids available in the US. When you take a look at the most efficient ones, there are a reasonable number of vehicles in there that would fit all sorts of situations, including the Chrysler Pacifica minivan has estimated running costs of like $740 a year, and it seats 7.
Right. And I just had the Sorento plug-in hybrid from Kia, and at least where I live, there's a charging station at a Kroger, a grocery store, where the first 3 hours were free to charge there. And it only takes 3 hours and 25 minutes to fill up that car's electric or that car's battery. So I never filled it. I never had to fill up with gas. Like, if you can find a situation like that, you can kind of cheat the system a little bit and never spend money on filling those things up until you find yourself somewhere far away from home where you're not used to where the charging options are. You just happen to be driving a lot farther distances. So you can figure it out. And that's a 6-seater, not 7-seater, but yeah. Another sort of option to consider that people still don't, I guess people may have forgotten about, is the Nissan Leaf. Now that's a lot, it's a small little car. It's honestly the original mass market electric car. Like, it came out when I was in middle school, and I thought that was the craziest cool thing. I'd never seen an electric car before, and they're still kicking. They're still making them. The next generation probably won't be the same, body style you're used to. There are rumors that it'll become more of a crossover in its next iteration, but currently that's basically the least expensive electric car you can get into, because they have a new base model and
it still qualifies for the federal tax credit.
It still qualifies. So you can get into one of those for $27,400, but that credit will get you down to below $20,000.
And you'll get more than 100 miles of range. So as far as like the inexpensive EVs go, Leaf is not a bad deal as long as you use it appropriately, respect the actual mileage limits of the vehicle, and you don't live in a terribly hot climate, because the battery is still air cooled in that model.
I think that's actually, like, people have asked me before, like, if I'm trying to get my son or daughter in high school or college their first car, just like a car in general, that's actually one that I would recommend, especially for the high schoolers who come home every night to their parents. And you can get one that's the one that ends up being under $20,000. It's only 150 miles of range. But when I was in high school, I wasn't putting that many miles on my car. So it's not like that's going to be much of an issue. So that's one I definitely recommend to parents out there who are like, well, if I want to save money and give my kids a car, the Nissan Leaf is a good option for that.
Yeah, and Matthew here is asking about his soon-to-be 16-year-old wants a car that is going to last 8 to 10 years. I think a plug-in hybrid is a good idea in this segment as well, because the likelihood of that battery packing lasting that time is definitely good, because the battery packs in plug-in hybrids and hybrids are used very differently than in EVs. And it's certainly going to give them the ability to shift a lot of their consumption over to electricity for shorter journeys, et cetera. So if they're doing, the school run commute, unless their college or school is a long way away from where they're living, they should be able to do that almost entirely on electricity. I will say that when they move away to college, if there aren't adequate charging facilities, then, the benefit of a plug-in hybrid over a hybrid, that ends up being an open-ended question. Now, if you're buying the vehicle, obviously you'd get the tax credit. If you're going to have them buy the vehicle, keep in mind that they would need taxable earnings to actually get that tax credit on a plug-in hybrid vehicle. I would say, if you can find a Tucson plug-in hybrid, would be my preference over the Prius Prime, just because it's a more comfortable, more usable, practical vehicle. But Prius Prime is definitely inexpensive. It is a really great buy if you're looking for inexpensive plug-in hybrid transportation.
Yeah, and it's currently the most efficient of all the plug-in hybrids you can currently get. And they only start at $28,200. So yeah, it's not super expensive. I think for, if I had a high schooler, someone around 16, I would probably give them the Tucson instead, just because the Prius isn't the most pretty thing to look at, and maybe that would be an issue for his friends being like, hey, like, oh, that's ugly, but that's just whatever.
Yep. Yep. So our next question here is from Phantom Tuba. Will Honda's 1.5 or 2.0 hybrid go into any Acuras? I am surprised by Acura's answer on this one. I've asked them many times over all the years, and I keep being told no. They think it's inappropriate for Acuras. They think it's somehow a bad fit for the brand, so they say no. So not in any vehicle left. Yeah. Let's see here. So Jake is asking about the Outlander plug-in hybrid. We're actually going to get an all-new Outlander plug-in hybrid. So if you want one now, and if you can find one, because they are really, really shy on dealer lots, as I understand them, it's still the old Highlander. So if you want the new one with the plug-in hybrid, that's coming next year.
Outlander, yeah. And I like the new design, so I'm glad that they're bringing it back, because I think that's a unique looking car, and and actually you corrected me on this, because I thought for the longest time that the current Outlander plugin still retained its third row, but it does not. I confirmed that. So I'm wondering if they'll change that for this new one. I don't think they are going to, but still.
The rumor mill is that the European model still has the third row. Whether we will get it in the US, I don't know, but I do know that in Europe, the third row is the same.
Okay.
So yes, we hope. But it is going to be considerably smaller. The third row is much smaller than Sorento.
Oh, yeah.
And then obviously much, much smaller than, the 3-row Chrysler Pacifica. If you want a plug-in hybrid with long range and an actually usable third row, it's basically going to be a minivan.
Yeah.
So let's see here. We have a next question here. Pathfinder. Oh, actually, it's funny. I'm driving the Pathfinder this week, as it so happens. I guess it depends on what kind of off-road capability you're looking at. Off-road capability-wise, there's not a lot of variation between Highlander, Pathfinder, Telluride, Sorrento. Insert your 3-row crossover here.
Right.
Unless it's a electric all-wheel drive vehicle like the hybrid Highlander, then there is going to be an off-road difference. But for the vast majority, they're honestly pretty similar.
Yeah, there's also the Grand Cherokee L, but those start at 40,000, so I'm not sure if that's sort of in the category we're talking about, but that is something.
If you
that doesn't have a 4xe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be the one there. Admittedly, let's see here. Grand Cherokee L starts at 40,325. But Honda Pilot starts at 37,580 for the sport configuration. So, it's not too far off. It's definitely gonna be more expensive. But if you want more off-road capability, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yep.
It's also gonna be harder to park though, since it was designed for that big V8 up front. But the interior is about the same size as a Highlander interior. It's almost full-size SUV sized on the outside, but mid-size on the inside.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So Down Tempo is asking, is there a tax credit for CPO hybrids? No. That is a good question. There have been a lot of talk about trying to create incentive programs, state and local and federal incentives for plug-in hybrids and EVs. For hybrids, there hasn't been any incentive for quite some time. And on the plug-in hybrid and EV front, it's possible that we may get incentives at some point in the future. It doesn't look like those laws are going to pass anytime soon, though. So at the moment, it's new plug-in hybrid and new full EV only.
Some people are asking about the ID Buzz, and I think that's a nice
topic
to talk about. Let's see.
So yeah, Vic, you are correct. It is basically a ID4 with a van body on it, because that was the whole promise of Volkswagen's new electric car platform. That's also going to spawn the Audi, the ID3 and the ID4 are related. There are going to be other ID models at some point for Europe specifically, as well as for worldwide audiences that we will also get in the US. Exactly which ones end up where, details are sketchy. But we do know, for instance, that in America, we're getting a bigger ID Buzz than they get in Europe. So in Europe, they'll only have the 2-row for now. Later, there will be a 3-row long wheelbase ID Buzz. And the only ID Buzz we will get is the bigger 3-row one.
Which is kind of sad because they also have that cargo one. I know they don't really. There's not like too many cargo vans like that on
Mhm.
offer here. That's mostly a European thing. But that would have been kind of an interesting offering for companies who might need something like that over here. But maybe the demand will change by that time because it's not going to be on sale here till 2024. So you have
Yes.
time.
And that is kind of the funny thing about a lot of the new EVs that honestly I'm excited to see, is that none of them are happening soon. And I want them to be here now. Hummer EV is very limited production. Theoretically, it is on sale right now. Very limited
Yep.
production. The Hummer or the GMC Sierra EV, that's not even officially announced. We know it's coming, not even officially announced.
Right.
The Chevy Silverado EV, that's quite a ways away.
Yeah.
And if you want anything that's less than $100,000 on that Silverado, it is really far away.
Yeah.
And we don't even know what the mid-price points will be priced like. This is like a lesson in PR speak. So, GM says, well, it'll be available in 2023 with this model. The RST is coming first. It's a $105,000 truck.
Mhm.
Then they said, then later there will be a lower priced version. Then at some point later, there will be a $39,000 version. And a lot of people assumed that the one later will be the $39,000 one. They haven't actually said when you'll get the $39,000 Silverado.
Right.
That's, I think, the key.
Well, they also earlier this week told us, or they gave us a teaser of the Blazer EV, but that'll
Yes.
be the SS trim. So it's only
Mhm.
probably going to be the same situation where in spring of 2023, when that one is available, it'll just be the most expensive, higher performing one. Then they'll later bring on the less expensive ones. So it seems like that's kind of their game plan for all of these new EVs.
Yeah, and it is an interesting way of doing it. I mean, it's a financially responsible way, I would say, of launching EVs. It's not what the enthusiast wants. It's not what environmentalists necessarily want, which is to get EVs to the masses. But it is going to be more profitable for them to get those higher profit margin
Mhm.
vehicles out first, then roll out the ones that everybody else will buy. And I do find it interesting that Ford's going after things in a very different way because Mach-E, Select and GT were later. The core
Mm.
models were actually the ones shipping first, then the base one, then Select trim, and then GT was the last one. And with Lightning, it appears to be a very similar format. So the mid-level trim, XLT and Lariat, those seem to be coming first. Then there's going to be the work truck version. And then at some point, the Platinum will be in there in production. We haven't had any specific windows into that. But I was told basically by Ford, and I should say to everybody that we do have a production date on the Lightning that we ordered. It's May
Woohoo!
8th. May 8th is when our Lightning will be built. And it is a Lariat trim Lightning. So it is interesting that Ford has gone about this in a different direction where they're trying to prioritize those core models and they've actually delayed the expensive ones. So all the Lincoln EVs that were promised, those have actually been put temporarily on hold so they could build less expensive ones.
Right. And sorry, Chris, I know we're coming to get to your question here, but also something to note since this happened since our last live stream, but the Rivian situation where they were like, oh no,
Oh yes.
these aren't expensive enough. We didn't charge people as much as we should have. So now everyone, even people who have already been waiting for the reservation, they got to pay more money for the version they thought they were getting. And now we're going to supplement it with this dual motor version that's the same price as the one you thought you were getting. That was a
That
kind of
is
an
an extra
unfortunate move on their
18
part.
months out. Did you see
Yeah.
that part? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they backtracked, thankfully.
Mhm.
So in theory, if we continue with our Rivian
Right.
reservation, who knows if we will or not? We'll see. In theory, if we continue with the Rivian reservation, it would be honored at the pre massive hike in price. But I will say, the Tesla Model Y has its MSRP transaction price because it's the same company. Its base price has gone up 20% since January 2021, and the Model 3 has gone up 11% since 2021.
Yeah.
So clearly, EV manufacturers are definitely going in that direction. And I will say that business-wise for Tesla, I think that's a brilliant move because Tesla's biggest problem so far has been making money, and this brings them closer to profitability, to be perfectly honest. But I would also say that anybody that really thinks that Tesla's going to have an actual $35,000 MSRP car with 300 miles of range anytime soon, that does not seem very likely at this point in time. because then they've also said publicly they're not even developing it. So Matthew, this kind of goes with the question we had earlier about having a solar array and EVs in the light of recent fuel surge prices. This goes with something that I've said before. If you have, I've heard this a lot from people that have EVs and people that have solar arrays. And I will preface this by saying that I have a ginormous one. So my solar array is about 4 times large, actually 5 times larger than the average solar install in the US. Actually, I can't even do math. It's way larger than that. The average solar install in the US is 3.6 kW, according to the Department of Energy. I have a 20 kilowatt array, and we have the panels to upgrade it to 30 kilowatts, which is what we're going to be doing this spring. And it is not enough to power an EV. So let's put that on the table. Right. The solar array on its own covers about 2,500 square feet, which is larger than the average suburban home's entire roof surface. Even assuming that roof surface could point towards the sun, this is bigger than that roof would be total. It's bigger than the average American backyard. I live on 13 acres, so it's not a problem. But these are the kinds of things that would be required if you actually wanted to personally go for energy independence. We'd be talking about massive, massive sized arrays. And I will say that is exactly what my mission was, but I didn't really factor in, anything extra. So, our 20 kW array meets our needs 10 months of the year. 2 months of the year, we have to reconnect to the grid. But I absolutely could not really support an EV during the spring or the fall or the winter. During the summer, there's a bit of extra power, but most people need cars they can drive every year. The reality is that, you can offset things a lot. So and I would definitely encourage you to do that. Solar is getting cheaper and cheaper all the time. If you have a roof that points more or less south, that is absolutely ideal. If it points sort of southeast or southwest, you can still get some definite usable power out of your roof. And roof is dead space anyway. You should stick solar panels up there, coat that thing with solar panels, and you can definitely offset a lot of your use. It's sort of the same theory as a plug-in hybrid, really, where you're not, in a logical world, you're not attempting to replace the utility, but you can drastically reduce the amount of energy that you pull from the utility. So let's move on here. Do you see any new questions down there at the bottom that we should ask here?
Well, I've got
Lincoln has an EV. So here we go.
Sorry.
Did I hit the wrong button there? They were supposed to have an EV. So to answer your question, do you recall, was it the Aviator, I think?
Well, no, remember originally it was going to be a Rivian-based vehicle, and then they canceled that project. So right. I don't know what the plan is now.
The Lincoln one that they prioritized production for Mach-E and F-150 Lightning. Do you remember what it was originally?
Well, sorry, what was the question? I missed it.
The Lincoln, there was originally let me phrase it this way. There was originally a Lincoln plan to build a Lincoln EV, and it was supposed to be this calendar year, but they delayed its production because they need the factory capacity for F-150 Lightning and Mach-E, battery and factory capacity. But I don't remember which Lincoln it was.
I'm pretty sure it was Aviator because I know the Explorer got delayed. Like it's supposed to get an EV, but it's not going to come out for a couple of years. So it's got to be the Aviator.
That's the one. Yeah. There were some assumptions it might be a Lincoln Mach-E, but it doesn't appear that way. It looks like it was going to be some existing model that was sort of converted there. Mm-hmm. So Matthew, hopefully we will have videos for you at some point in time. Who knows exactly when that will happen, but stay tuned there. This is an interesting question. Do you think Tesla will ever make the Cybertruck, and do you think it will be $39,000?
Well, I mean, there's evidence that they're working on it, not too much, but it's one of those things where when it first was announced, it was so out there and so like not ready. And the fact that they keep delaying it, and they've even delayed it further, like recently, they're like, oh, it's not coming out till like I think 2024 now, or maybe late 2023 at the earliest, or something like that. I feel like I don't know how in its current form it's even allowed to exist, like just based on the design, crash safety standards, things like that in general. I'm just like surprised that shape is like even possible to become a mass production vehicle. But in terms of the actual $39,000 base one, I mean, if they can't even do that for a Model 3 right now, I can't
That's the
imagine
thing.
doing it for a large truck like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that would put it $5,000 less than a Model 3, and the
Yeah.
Model Three's current price, which has gone up 11% this just in one calendar year.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with I don't think the $39,000 thing will happen.
Yeah.
I think that's a pipe dream.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of okay with that because and if you're a Tesla fan, I would argue that you should be okay with it as well, because if Tesla's supposed to make money and exist to survive as a company, then they need to make money, and a $39,000 Cybertruck probably would lose money. So will there be a Civic hatchback to replace the Insight? Honda has not said anything about this generation Civic getting a hybrid officially. Have you heard any rumors, Brian, on that?
I've seen spy shots of it. I think there have been a couple of instances where it's been tested, and I guess they could tell based on what was going on under the body. They're like, okay, I forget. It's been a couple months since I last saw it, but what I saw was the sedan. So I don't know if they're working on the hatchback version of it, or in general if they are going to make it a hatchback. But I think that'd be kind of a smart idea, because a lot of the Prius is a hatchback. A lot of hybrids are hatchbacks. Kia
I
Niro
actually
hybrid
managed
is
to
a
find a
hatchback.
spy shot of a hatch hybrid.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen a hybrid that's been spotted as the hatchback body style. I'd have to look
Yeah,
into that again. But
I didn't see that before, but I just tripped across an image now. So,
oh, did you see it?
so yeah,
Okay.
it appears that there might be a hybrid
Oh,
hatch.
okay, good.
I'm intrigued to see if that actually comes to the U.S. One would assume it probably would. So,
Yeah.
that is interesting here.
Mhm.
Let's see here. Can solar panels be damaged by hail? Yes, they can be. Um, your insurance should cover it, although I will say that it's unlikely to be damaged by hail. You'd have to have very, very large hail. I live in a redwood forest, so we had one panel that was damaged in a windstorm, and it was damaged in a windstorm by an 8-inch diameter redwood pole. It was bigger than this around, so it's like a branch from a redwood tree that was this big around, fell about 250 feet from the top of the tree down, smacked right onto a panel, and it put a pretty nice big dent in the solar panel. But the panel actually continued to generate power for 9 months, so we didn't bother to replace it for 9 months until it started having a ground fault issue, and then we actually replaced the panel. But they're pretty sturdy. They're made of tempered glass, and you can stand on them and jump on them without a problem. So they are far more durable far more durable than a lot of people would assume.
Right. Really quickly, sort of, I just want to address this really quickly, going back to the Lincoln. No, the Lincoln Zephyr is the sedan that they've reintroduced for China, and that there will be an electric, I believe, version of that there, but that's not coming here, unfortunately, because it looks pretty good.
I love the way that vehicle looks. Let me see if I can
Yeah.
find a picture here. Will you find another question to answer there?
Okay.
Because I think that Ford should just bring that puppy back.
Yeah, because even the Fusion that they're getting them is really nice looking too. Especially the interior, which it has that dashboard that's all screen, which could be a reliability nightmare. Who knows? But it looks really cool, and it's what people these days want in their cars. Really cool tech like that, and so for me, that's appealing. I guess let me see. I know a couple people asked about this, but yeah, let's look at that.
There is the Lincoln Zephyr. It's a good looking car. If the MKZ thing in the US had looked like that, maybe they could have sold some.
Okay, so I know this is such a minor topic, but the MKZ, when it was redesigned for 2013 and it had that design language with the sort of wing-looking grille, I know so many people didn't, or at least like journalists and enthusiasts did not like that, but I thought that was the best looking sedan in its class. And I still, every time I see one of those, I'm always like, wow, like that still looks really good to this day. So I know when they updated it, they gave it the current grille shape, and I was like, it looks weird, but I've always been a fan of that car.
Yeah.
All right, I found one about the next Tacoma that I think would be a good question, because there's a good chance they're going to do that, because I don't think, I mean, I was a Toyota Tacoma owner of the current generation. I had a 2016, so that was the first year of this current generation, and I was not a fan of that 3.5 liter V6 and 6-speed automatic combination. And fuel economy wise, even though they tuned it for better fuel efficiency, I wasn't getting good gas mileage in it. No better than the old 4 liter that you can still get in the 4Runner. I imagine they're going to put that if it is a turbo, that 2.4 is probably a good candidate for it. But it's also a car engine.
Yeah,
It's very much suited for that, and that's that was kind of the problem with the 3.5 liter in the Tacoma. It wasn't really trucky enough, so I'm not sure.
It's possible that they might. I think the bigger problem and the reason the Tacoma had such bad fuel economy with that engine, I think it had more to do with the transmission choice of Toyota and final gear ratios and gear ratios, just generally speaking. A lot of people ask, well, why don't they do this or that with the engine to improve fuel economy? I would say, remember, fuel economy is a holistic thing. When you look at the Prius, the reason the Prius gets excellent fuel economy isn't just because of the engine. It's because everything else going on with the Prius is focused on fuel economy. The aerodynamics, the rolling resistance, the friction of the bearings, everything about it is focused on that one mission. And if you have a generic insert your whatever vehicle here and you just change one thing, you're probably not going to have a big impact. Really excellent example would be General Motors full-size SUVs and trucks that had their hybrid system way back when, about 10, 15 years ago.
The two-mode hybrid,
the two-mode hybrid, they perfectly demonstrated that simply swapping the engine out is just not going to be, enough. Someone here, I've lost track of the question here, was asking about the price of installing a EV charging station at home. Installing an EV charging station at home is not actually terribly expensive. It depends exactly on your home situation and your situation, generally speaking. Like for me, it would be probably on the very expensive side of things because my parking area and the house are quite far apart. They're further apart than the entire length of the average city lot. So that would be a problem. There'd be a lot of trenching involved. But average single-family homeowners, which is the demographic for EVs, and I would stress this part, that at this moment, the average buyer of an EV is a dual income, single family home owning household that owns more than 2 cars. So EVs tend to be second cars, third cars. Obviously, there are exceptions all over the place. People have EVs as their only car. Maybe they only have one car and that car is an EV. But the general rule here is that EV shoppers fall into this demographic. So for them, whether or not you're using your garage, your electrical panel is going to be pretty darn close. So most single family homes, the electrical panels are somewhere near or around the garage adjacent. So we're not talking about a very large run. Depending on your use case and how many miles you drive, you may actually be able to use the EVSE that comes with the vehicle and be fine. So if your daily commute is the average American commute, where it's maybe 12 to 20 miles a day, pretty much any EV can charge overnight with the cord that comes with the EV just fine. And there are a large number of EVs that come with dual voltage EVSEs. So for instance, a lot of Teslas, I think actually every Tesla now comes with the dual voltage EVSE. The Ford Mustang Mach-E does. Some of the Volvo plug-in hybrids even come with dual voltage EVSEs. And there, if you already have an existing dryer outlet, you can either unplug your dryer and plug it in if you want to do that all the time, or you can get a splitter. There are actually some active splitters that will automatically turn the dryer off while the EV is charging and allow you to use the same outlet for both. Or essentially all you have to do is have a dryer outlet installed next to your car and you plug in the included adapter with it and away you go. Even if you had to buy a separate EVSE, you can get one for $400, $500 that will definitely give you the kind of range you'd be expecting overnight.
This one, I don't know if I feel like we've talked about this before perhaps, but the ZDX was way ahead of its time, was it not? I would say so.
I think it was, yeah. I mean, obviously BMW had some coupe-like things, and
the X6 was out before that, I guess.
Yeah, X6 was technically out before, and X6, I would remind everybody, X6 sold really badly. It's only started to sell better lately, and it still doesn't sell like the X5. I think that Acura just wasn't willing to stick with it.
Yeah. I mean, it was also, at the time, it had that design language that everyone called the beak. And it was very pronounced and very kind of in your face. And I guess maybe that put people off. But the overall shape and the rear end design, I thought looked really good. So yeah I think it'd be interesting if they brought that back, but I don't think they are going to, at least not right now.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see if other manufacturers follow the coupe crossover thing. There's going to be some videos coming out for everybody that's watching, so hit that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. There is going to be a BMW X4M video and a Civic hatchback video. And the interesting thing about having these two vehicles at exactly the same time, for me at any rate, was that it's a similar theme. The X4M, if you look at it from sort of top of the wheel wells up. It looks like a sedan. So
Mhm.
all they've really done with the X6 and the X4 and the GLE Coupe and the GLC Coupe and the ZDX and all that, they basically just made a lifted sedan.
Right.
So I am intrigued to see if sedan shoppers gravitate towards those or if they really just want the bigger box.
Yeah.
Because the entire reason to X2 over an X1 or X4 over an X3 or X6 over an X5 is style. It's not practicality or sportiness. The X4M and the X3M handle nearly identically. Same thing with the X5 and X6. It's all about, do you want the sportback thing or do you want a hatch?
And I think Infiniti is actually doing pretty well with the QX55. I've actually seen recently a lot of those around
Yeah.
here. So
I'm
maybe that's
interested to
working.
see how that sales goes. Are
I
they
know.
splitting it out separately?
Well, they're different. They're completely different names. It's not like
Uh-huh.
QX50 Sport or QX50 like Sportback. It's QX55.
Right.
So I imagine they're going to count them separately.
It's
So one,
never stopped manufacturers from combining sales numbers. That's my complaint. So, like Grand Cherokee and Grand Cherokee L, we have no idea how these models sell independently. 2 Series sedan and 2 Series coupe, even though they share absolutely nothing with one another,
yeah.
totally different vehicles jammed together in one sales number. So it makes it difficult to really tell, how does that thing actually sell.
And I wonder if for like Wagoneer and Grand Wagoneer if they'll do that too.
Yeah, those are combined, as I
They're combined.
recall, and like all 3 series sales are combined, and always have been. So back when it was coupe, sedan, wagon, and
And
convertible, all
GT, the
4 of them,
GT.
yeah,
Remember
all
that?
of them were jammed into the same number to make sure that number was nice and big.
I was a big fan of the 3
Yeah,
Series Gran Turismo and the 5 Series, which became the 6 Series Gran Turismo for 1 year. And whenever I see those, I'm like, good on you for getting that, because you could have gotten a crossover, you could have gotten an X5, but you got the 3 Series GT. Good on you. You're like one of 4 people.
yeah,
But they're
I
cool.
kind of liked it, and but at that time, it always seemed strange that we have a 3 Series GT, and we have
The 4 Series
a
Gran Coupe.
a
Yeah,
France 4 Series Grand Coupe and an X4.
yeah, it's
And
a lot.
they're kind of all the same sort of thing with varying amounts of ground clearance and beaver on the front.
Right.
So
Right.
apparently in 2021, Infiniti sold 4,000 QX55s. They sold about 1,400 per quarter.
Hmm.
Is that good or bad?
What is the QX50?
QX50 sold, let's see here, in 2021, sold 19,000 for the whole year. So 20% of that pairing was coupe crossover.
Okay.
That's actually better than I thought.
Yeah. They look good. I'll be honest. Whenever I see them, I'm like, oh, those look pretty good. But they drive just like the regular QX50.
They do,
I haven't driven them, but
which
yeah.
is not so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
So there was a question way at the beginning when we first started about the new 1.3 liter turbo and the new Rogue, which is the variable compression
yes.
engine. That is something interesting because it's more powerful than the outgoing naturally aspirated 4-cylinder it had. And it's supposed to be more fuel efficient. I imagine. I don't know, but do you think that's going to trickle out to the Altima and anything else? I feel like it has to at this point.
I would feel like it has to. I am really interested to drive it. We have not had the chance yet. Because the VC turbo and CVT combo, these things separately don't bother me at all. Like a CVT, I really does not bother me that much if it's in the right vehicle. I mean, obviously, you're not going to, create a high performance Bentley with a CVT. That would be weird. But if we're talking about a small hatchback or a small efficient sedan, CVTs are just fine. But the combination of that and Nissan software and the variable compression turbo is just a hot mess in the QX50. It cannot make up its mind what it wants to do. And it's the same thing in the Altima. And it was funny because I kind of was unsure about how I felt about it at the launch event of the QX50 and the QX55. I was like, well, this is kind of weird. Would I be able to adjust to it? And recently I had the opportunity to drive a QX50 again and drove it back to back with an Acura MDX, which is definitely in the same kind of shopping neighborhood as a QX50, and it's just weird. I don't know if I would ever get used to it. I think
Yeah.
that's the problem.
I mean, it's very advanced stuff, and I think the mission was very good, like what they wanted to get out of it. Yeah, from
Mhm.
everything I've seen, because I haven't driven them, but yeah, it sounds like the combination doesn't work very well there.
Everything, it's like and it could just be the turbocharger plus, maybe it's not, maybe it's actually not the variable compression part. Maybe it's the turbocharger plus the CVT, but basically what happens is you start off from a stop and you've decided that we aren't getting enough acceleration. So you dig a little bit deeper into the accelerator pedal, and then the CVT varies its ratio, and then you've realized, oh, well, now I actually have enough. So you back off a little bit on the throttle, and then for some reason you slow down, and you're like, oh, that's not what I want. So you put your foot just in a little bit, and then you get a little bit too much, and then you have to pull it back and get a little bit too little. And so finding that right balance is hard, is strangely difficult, let's put it that way.
Mm.
And strangely unintuitive for a vehicle. It's odd.
Right. And then sort of regarding that question really quickly, yeah, I don't think we're getting the new Rogue Sport, the Qashqai in Europe. I don't think it's coming here, right?
Nobody has said. So it's an open-ended question. It Let's put it this way. If we are going to get it, we should start seeing spy shots soon, because in Nissan's product sort of cycle, the plan, if it was going according to plan, it would have happened after Aria, which is going to be late for the US. So we should get Z first, then Aria, then theoretically Rogue Sport, if we ever get it. So Naveen has an interesting point here. So on the CVT reliability, basically just Jatco transmissions from a specific time frame have had reliability issues. So when you look at reliability statistics currently available for newer models of Nissan CVTs don't seem to have any particular transmission issues that highlight them over other vehicles in the same segment with CVTs or with traditional stepped automatics. As long as it's designed well, this should not be a problem. The newer chain-driven designs, like we find in Honda CVTs, have actually been fairly reliable. The IVT, which is basically a CVT that Nissan or Hyundai and Kia use, those have been fine reliability-wise, as has Toyota's CVT. So I'm not overly worried just based on to CVT or not to CVT. That doesn't bother me at all personally.
Now, do you know the reliability of the ones that Toyota uses, where like in the Corolla, it's the first gear is a regular gear and the rest is CVT, or like the LC or the Lexus LC has like 4 transmission gears in the hybrid and then it's a CVT? Do we know about that system?
So 2 very different ones. So the Toyota one in the Corolla is actually very similar to the small engine CVT that Nissan uses. So Nissan also uses a 2-speed gear set in their transmission, but they use it a little bit differently. So there's no particular difference in reliability there, because all they're basically doing in the Toyota version is they basically have a two-speed setup here. So the gear ratio goes through the physical gear set. Once that's done, it locks over to low ratio in the CVT part and then varies low to high in that range. And if you get slow enough, then it will shift back to the first gear. In small Nissans like the Versa, etc., they use just a 2-speed on the output side of the CVT. So it basically expands the ratio set. So as you're accelerating, you get low ratio to high ratio in the CVT. Then it switches to the high ratio gear set and then varies from low to high again. So you will feel a shift in the middle of that, but 2 kind of different things. And then on the Lexus transmissions, this is actually Lexus's power split system. So it's the same technology in the Prius, where there's no CVT, but they pair their power split device with a 4-speed automatic. And then for reasons that nobody's fully explained, program it to imitate 10 gears.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's complex.
It's interesting. The design of that Lexus transmission is the one that I kind of expected the Tundra to use, but it didn't end up actually getting that. They ended up reinventing the wheel for it, and their logic was the claim that in their design with the Lexus transmission, there's no way to bypass the power split device at the end fully. So it's always at least semi-engaged, and they claimed that it was too inefficient for towing heavy loads. That was their concern. It is similar to the two-mode system that we talked about earlier, though, that GM, Mercedes, BMW, and Chrysler co-developed that's still used in Allison buses. The key difference in that system, and the reason it was so expensive, was because you can actually bypass the power split device, and you could have it just use 4 mechanical gears to move the vehicle forward. So for towing and heavy vehicle applications, where that would present an efficiency loss or an overheating concern, you can just bypass it and you eliminate that concern. But it was expensive.
Interesting.
So let's see here. So this is an interesting question here too. So the CVT in the Ford Maverick is not a CVT at all either. So this is again the same thing. So the regular Maverick has a regular automatic transmission. It's a Ford General Motors co-developed 8-speed front-wheel drive transmission. So it's the same basic transmission design that's used in a wide variety of GM and Fords. Ford chose 8 speeds, GM chose 9 speeds, but it's the same thing. And then the Maverick Hybrid uses a planetary power split system. So they're 2 electric motors, there's a planetary gear set, and that's it. So sometimes manufacturers have called them CVTs in the past, and Ford and Toyota have walked away from that description because it was confusing people, and people were worried that it wouldn't be reliable like a Nissan CVT. That's always been the one that people come back to is, well, it has a CVT like this Nissan, so it must not be reliable. But the design is very, very different in those transmissions. And they actually are the opposite end because they're so mechanically simple. Planetary power split systems are the most reliable type of transmission we have right now on sale in the US, whether it's Toyota's Aisin, Toyota developed Aisin built planetary power split system in the Prius and everything else they do, or whether it's Ford's that is now in-house built. It used to be built by Aisin as well. Or the one in the Chevy Volt, or the Cadillac ELR, or the Chrysler Pacifica minivan. So those all operate on basically the same principle there.
Let's see. If we want to stick back with Infiniti for a second, what caused Infiniti to lose their way? Is it the people Genesis put on their teams and the expedited timeline for getting to electricity? Because Genesis is jumping over plug-in hybrids, going straight to electric. They're much newer than Infiniti, but that timeline was just like way, just expedited really quickly recently here. And then Infinity's kind of been trying to figure that out. I don't know, is that the people they have working with them that have, because Genesis pulled from so many different places to get their team going.
I think honestly the key difference between Infiniti and Genesis is simply money. Genesis has more money. And Hyundai has a lot of money. Hyundai is a company that doesn't just build cars, is part of the important thing to remember. They're this, I forget what the Korean term is, but they're this massively vertically integrated company. So there's Hyundai Heavy Equipment and Hyundai Steel and Hyundai this and Hyundai that and Hyundai everything. And so the parent company simply chose that we have this strategic mission. We want to have a luxury brand and we have the cash to do it. And so we're just going to pour cash on everything and just light it on fire. And Nissan just doesn't have the money. They elected to / were convinced to buy Mitsubishi. And that did not go as well as some might have liked. And then right around that same time, of course, we had the subprime lending fiasco, and then they had their president in jail. And, things have not gone overly well for Nissan as the overarching corporation, and they just don't have the money to throw at it. And I think that's really the answer.
All right. Let's see. Now, Naveen is saying that Lexus has lost their way too. Lexus has a different way, though.
Yeah,
I think that's the thing. Lexus is. They've kind of for a while there they were Toyota Plus. Then they got condemned for not being bold enough, for not being sporty enough. So they went into this direction where their grills are really big and in your face, and some people liked it, some people didn't. But sales reflected that people did like it, and now they're kind of in this position where they feel like they have to stick with that design to keep people coming back. And it's perhaps not aging well with everybody, because I know people were like, I don't like the way that their grills look, and they keep doing it like that. I'm like, well, people
Yeah.
keep buying them like that, and people like it. But they haven't, even with their new electric stuff, they're kind of going to keep that same shape.
That's definitely going.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Lexus has always had this sort of twin track thing where they have some vehicles that are based on other models in the Toyota envelope, and then they've got the standalone product that is unique and not based on anything, not related to anything Toyota.
Right.
And it does seem to be continuing. Whether or not that will live on forever, we don't know, because now the numbers are starting to dwindle. But that's what's always made Lexus a little bit unique, and sometimes sometimes shamed for it, is that we have, the LS, which is a unique vehicle platform. It came first, and then was followed very shortly after by the ES, their other longest running nameplate, which at the time was a Camry, luxury Camry. Now it's a luxury Avalon. But the Avalon is now dead. So now, is it a unique product or is it related? I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
But it has been the two fork method that Lexus has gone after the luxury segment. If you want to spend the money, you can get the rear wheel drive ultimate expression of what Toyota can build in the Lexus LS. Or if you want a quiet, comfy, soft driving luxury sedan that's going to be reliable and fuel efficient, you can buy a Lexus ES. And oddly, they're almost the same size inside, but very different in price and demographic.
Now, isn't the new Mirai based on the LS platform?
It is, which is interesting.
That's an interesting twist. Yeah.
Yeah, that was an interesting twist because it was the only thing they had that was rear wheel drive, and they really wanted to make the Mirai sportier. And there was a plan to build a Lexus hydrogen vehicle that we have not heard a peep about since.
Which was like the GS replacement, right? It was supposed to be something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we ever see a Lexus hydrogen vehicle, they're going to be interrelated, the one with the other, which does make logical sense. But yeah, that's basically the difference with Lexus. And Genesis decided to go the opposite direction because they saw the sort of scorn by enthusiasts and the some journalists and some of the public that said, well, that's nothing but a gussied up Camry. So Genesis saw that and they said, well, we can never do that. We have to go a different direction with everything. But their EVs, those are sharing platforms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm intrigued to see how that differentiation goes longer term, because EVs are obviously very expensive and it didn't make sense. I mean, Genesis blows billions of dollars on the experiment that is Genesis.
Mm-hmm.
But are they willing to go to that next level and have unique EV platforms? And we don't know.
Right. Now, this is interesting because we obviously, like a week or two ago, saw that leaked New York dealer or New York region timeline for launches of Toyota vehicles, and the Crown was on there. And of course, we've never had, or at least I think we used to a long time ago, get the Crown here, but it's been forever and ever. And that's just not a car they ever bring here. And now it looks like it is coming here, but will it be a sedan like it is over in Japan, or will it be some quasi crossover thing that's going to appeal to people in America? We don't know because we haven't really seen anything. The only thing that I've seen recently that was, spy shots of anything is that new BZ sedan, which was one of the many cars in that buffet of electric things that they showed off last year. And perhaps they won't, they're probably going to call it BZ something, but like maybe they're going to call it Crown instead. I don't know, but we haven't seen anything on the Crown.
I mean, it's like, I kind of would be interested to see a Crown come to the US because as a replacement for the Avalon, it might actually make sense to have a Crown in the US. I think that would be an interesting twist. Who knows? It also could be that it was a mistaken misquote thing and it really isn't coming, and maybe it was because the dealer saw it being tested somewhere, and car companies do validate cars all over the place. So Toyota obviously is doing some Crown evaluation in the US for world markets. Maybe they don't intend to bring it here, but we don't know.
Ford does that a lot. I mean, they've been testing that Fusion and the Zephyr in Michigan for a while now.
So many testing facilities.
Yeah.
So Matt CC16, I would say this is an interesting one. As someone that's actually lived with a hydrogen vehicle for 3 years, which is coming to an end. The Nexo's lease is up in May, and it is going back to Hyundai. Hydrogen stations, I really don't find this to be a problem at all. It's the not always working thing. They have been out of hydrogen here and there due to natural disasters over the course of 3 years. It's affected me maybe twice. The hard to find thing, not a problem at all. And the main reason is the range. The range is simply big on the hydrogen vehicle. The Nexo goes 350, 360 miles with the charge every single time. It very rarely varies. And hot, cold, etc. Hydrogen cars are very consistent in their range. So it's much less of a problem than you think, to be frank. And the fill-up time is so fast that they're very easy to live with. The reason that we're just not going to get another Nexo is because it would be the same thing. Why get the same thing? And the Mirai, I think, is a great landing at absolutely the wrong airport. Why they brought a hydrogen sedan with a tiny back seat to America, where nobody is buying sedans. Nobody's buying sedans with tiny back seats. And then it's a hydrogen car. It's like a trifecta of not going to sell. Why they didn't just give us a hydrogen Highlander, I will never understand, because that's what people actually want.
Right. And, you kind of have to be in California. There's nowhere else. I guess Washington, Oregon, maybe too, but not here.
No hydrogen there. Hawaii, Toronto, Vancouver, California, and large portions of Europe. Switzerland, the Netherlands, Norway, etc. Which is why there is a BMW hydrogen vehicle that is going to be on sale soon. The fuel cell iX is coming to Europe, probably not the United States, though.
Yeah.
And it was caught cold weather testing in Norway last week, something like that. Because there are definitely significant advantages, especially for Northern Europe. If you in the Nexo, we've taken the Nexo to Tahoe, and it's been in Tahoe at around 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Zero problems stopping the vehicle. No performance variation based on when it's cold or hot, doesn't matter. The range is very consistent, cold to hot, so you don't have that same kind of range anxiety and range loss in a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle that you have in a battery electric vehicle. And if it's sitting there overnight for extended periods of time, for battery lifetime, most EVs with battery heaters on board will expend some of their energy to make sure the battery is kept at least some dull roar temperature, because they don't want it to get down that cold. It reduces battery life, and that will consume battery power over time. You don't have that same worry in the hydrogen vehicle. Even though theoretically some hydrogen could get lost in the seals, et cetera, over time, basically you leave the Nexo for a month, you come back to it, it has the same range that it had when you left it.
Yeah, but as some of them are pointing out, like, you couldn't charge one at home.
Yeah, you cannot charge them at home.
Yeah.
But neither, you can't fill your gasoline car at home either. So,
No, that's true. That's true.
it depends on how you look at this, and I'm very torn as to which one is more convenient. I'm very unsure, bearing in mind that I cannot charge my EV really at home. I charge it at the office, and personally, that's just fine. So I charge it at the office, and I drive it home, and I drive it back. So that's a non-issue. But for some people, it's an inconvenience to plug it in, and for some people, it's an inconvenience to fill it up. And I just think it's a personal preference there.
Mm-hmm.
I argued this with my sister-in-law, who we tried to get her to buy a plug-in hybrid minivan, and she just got the regular non-hybrid minivan. And one of her reasons was, well, I think it's a hassle to plug it in every day. And I thought, well, so the plugging in every day is worse than going to the gas station every week? Because to me, they're not that far off. And if the plugging in keeps you from going to the gas station, then you've simply traded the one for the other. You haven't actually increased an inconvenience there.
Right. And then this is an interesting note too, because Toyota and Yamaha are working on a hydrogen fueled version of Toyota's 5-liter V8. I believe it's the 5-liter V8. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by this because BMW and Mercedes have tried hydrogen fuel powered combustion engines before. The ultimate problem is that they're not as efficient as fuel cells. Mm-hmm. They're less costly to develop, though.
Yeah, we'll see about it.
Let's see here. Someone was asking about other states, versus California and the hydrogen fuel cell. Yes, that is definitely a problem, obviously. But I would say that as far as alternative energy vehicles go, California is the lion's share of sales anyway. So, in California, it accounts for something like almost 90% of all alternative energy vehicles in the United States. Here, it's a sales share of maybe 9% plug-in hybrid plus hydrogen plus full battery electric for 2022 is about the rolling average. The national average is, about manual transmission sales, and that includes California, obviously. So that's kind of a thing there. Before we move on, exhaust freezing up and clogging below 32 degrees. No, because the water comes out of the bottom of the fuel cell stack where it's actually warm. So it's hot water, that's warm water that's basically leaving the vehicle. So it doesn't ever have a problem with freezing in that way. Well, let's see here.
I'm back up at the top. What do you got there?
Here, what do you think about this one? Someone's trying to get their sister to get the Pacifica Hybrid, but the men in her life want to get it, and she wants to get an Infiniti QX60.
Sheesh. I mean, I agree with the men in her life. She should definitely be getting.
So would you drive a Pacifica Hybrid?
Yeah, I would.
Wow, you would. So if we somehow bought a long-term Pacifica Hybrid and we shifted over to Atlanta, you'd drive it.
Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
I have people that would definitely ride with me in it, and I have things I guess I could put in it, but also it would save money. There would be the all-electric driving portion of it that I would take advantage of. I would, I don't drive too much in a day, so in some days I don't even drive because I can walk to a lot of places. So I mean, a car like that would just be kind of a smart option for me. I mean, I don't need it. I don't really need anything that big, but if I did, that would be. I'd rather have that than the QX60, which is still a very nice car, but efficiency wise, I feel like the Pacifica is the smarter move because it's more. There's much more car there, and I've driven the Pacifica in the normal version.
I thought maybe it's because did you grow up with the minivan? Do people that grow
my
up
mother? What was it? Yeah, the 2004 Toyota Sienna, that first year of that generation, I forced my mother to get that because I was so excited about, I don't know, having sliding doors and a third row seat that folded into the floor. I would have made her get the Grand Caravan because I thought Stow and Go was like the coolest thing of all time, and the fact that all the seats in the back could go on the floor. But she was like, "Oh, we're Toyota people, so we're gonna get the Sienna." But I was still very happy. So yeah, minivan. I grew up with that.
Oh, well, okay, interesting.
Yeah, I have no hate for the minivan.
Yeah, this is an interesting point. This is kind of a half true, half fallacy. So in a plug-in hybrid vehicle, remember, if you are actually doing the majority of your driving in electric mode, then no, you don't have the maintenance of the internal combustion engine in that same way. So the most plug-in hybrids, actually pretty much all plug-in hybrids that I know of now, will default to either an oil change once a year or at the appropriate mileage point. So you have the same sort of mitigation factor with gasoline. So remember that the point of the plug-in hybrid is not to go all electric. If you wanted to do that, you would go all electric logically. It's to mitigate and reduce your consumption of oil products. So you're using less gasoline, you're not using no gasoline. You're using less oil, you're not using no oil. So all the maintenance intervals really extend quite far out on a plug-in hybrid vehicle. So your brake pads last longer, the oil lasts longer, you don't have to change your air filters as often. All of that really stretches out if you're plugging it in. So let's see here. What else do you find here? Opinions on the 3-liter inline turbo. What do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, I actually don't know as much about this as you do.
It's late.
It's late, yeah, because there are a lot of vehicles that use this engine in their lineup right now, including what you said was probably the first recipient of the Wagoneer, but not the Grand Wagoneer because it'll probably keep that 6.4. But for anything with that 5.7, this would be a good alternative.
Yeah, that's supposedly the logic, is that this will replace that. And of course, we're going to see it in alphas as well. So this engine is derived from the Alpha 2-liter 4-cylinder engine,
which is a really good engine.
Which is a really good engine. And we don't know all the details yet, but it appears that the Chrysler side of the Stellantis portfolio will use a version of the engine that was adapted from the 2-liter turbo in Jeeps. So the 2-liter turbo in the Jeep lineup and the 2-liter turbo in the Alpha lineup are related, but they're not actually the same.
Right.
So the construction methods for the Jeep one focused on durability and dependability, and lower maintenance costs. And the Alpha one focused on high output and cooling. The way the cylinder bores are designed, and one's an open deck and one's a closed deck design, which you can all Google yourself there later. So cooling wise, there's some variations there, but we don't know all those details. But I am interested in this because everybody seems to be moving to inline sixes. There's going to be a Mazda one. The Mazda's one's going to be in Lexus's. There's the new Mercedes one. Inline sixes are cool.
Yeah, and speaking of the Mazda, so we saw the CX-60 come out this week, which is not for the US. To reiterate, we're getting the odd numbered vehicles, 50, 70, 90. We'll be driving the 50 in the end of this month.
Unrelated. Yep, we'll be driving this month. Yep.
It won't, because it doesn't get the inline six, but the other ones should, and the replacement for the Mazda 6 should get it, and it'll be interesting to see how those feel and how they perform, because I mean, they're also bringing the plug-in hybrid system too, but that's not with an inline, or is it inline six? Is it paired that powertrain? I can't remember now.
The Mazda plug-in hybrid that we know about is going to be four-cylinder with the plug-in hybrid, but there are rumors that there might be a plug-in hybrid 6-cylinder, because the 6-cylinder is going to get a mild hybrid system standard.
Right.
Lots of details, obviously still sketchy at the moment. Because we probably won't see the inline six until the American debut of the CX-70.
Right.
So like you said, Europe is going to get a CX-60 and a CX-80, and those are going to be scaled down versions of what we
narrower versions,
right? So we're going to get the American sized version, which means slightly fatter, CX-70 and CX-90 to replace the CX something.
The CX-90 replaced the CX-9, but the CX-70, because remember the original CX-7. That was I thought that was a popular car, and I was very surprised they got rid of it, and then they just kept with the CX-5 and CX-9. So I guess I'm kind of hoping they bring it back, and it's sort of similar in design to that CX-7, because remember, it had the most, I guess was the term, not steeply raked, but the opposite of that windshield on any crossover or any SUV of all time. That windshield was nearly horizontal. It was a very sporty shape, so I feel like that would be cool if they brought back a more modern version of that design, because I liked it a lot.
Yeah, it was very Chrysler cab forwardy to me. We don't know what the CX-90 is going to look like yet, but it's probably just going to be a scaled version of the CX-60. Is what it's probably going to be. Mazda tends to really like the family resemblance. They're all little, Russian nesting dolls, and that is probably going to continue for them. It is interesting that Mazda's trying to go upmarket. It seems like Mazda is trying to be Acura, only rear-wheel drive, which is something that Acura probably should have attempted a while ago.
Yeah.
But that's the one thing I find interesting is I'm wondering who CX-70 is going to be targeted at, because the only other rear-wheel drive thing is a Grand Cherokee, which is not the same thing at all. Or you have to go European for that, or Genesis. So it could be, GV80. And CX-90, I mean, are we considering this a mainstream alternative to a BMW X7? Because that's kind of the only thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's going to be just more directly an MDX competitor.
Yeah, but different in substantive design. I mean, design wise, it's like X7 and GLS are the only things that approximate size, the size that we're assuming the CX-90 will be, with rear-wheel drive.
Well, I thought the CX-90 would be closer in size to the current CX-9, which is like Highlander size, isn't it?
Highlander sized inside. Outside it's pretty big. And the new one, if it's going to remain Highlander sized inside, is going to need to be even bigger to fit the inline six up front.
That's true.
Which is why Grand Cherokee L is X7 sized on the outside and Highlander sized on the inside, just like the X7 is really not that big on the inside. Because if you have an inline six, you got to have a long hood.
That's true. Here's an interesting one. Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think the answer is yes for any diesels like that for us. But
yeah, diesels are falling out of vogue in Europe, and they're falling, more or less out of vogue in the US. There's not a lot of new diesel engine development for emissions reasons here in the US. Particulate emissions are difficult for and nitrous oxide emissions are difficult even for a modern diesel engine to meet the latest standards, which is why they're falling out of vogue in Europe. And the fuel economy improvement that you get is not enough for companies to invest the resources that direction. I mean, a number of European companies like Volvo have already said that they've stopped diesel engine development. They're still selling some, but they're actually going to be phasing diesels out. It's been especially hard hit by some of the new regulations in France and Germany for emissions. So that's there's I think only a limited amount of time there. And it is worth noting that Ford specifically already whacked the diesel engine in the F-150. So I'm doubting our Ranger is unlikely to get it as a result.
Right, and like the new Audi S4 in Europe, which used to be a diesel, is now no longer a diesel. I believe it's the S4. Yeah. One of those models there, they switched it from being diesel to petrol.
Yeah, they've had a few models here and there, and plug-in hybrids have really taken over for that efficient alternative. And I know there's been a lot of talk about plug-in hybrids not really reaching the efficiency numbers that people had wanted, but the same thing actually has been said of diesels as well. That the fuel efficiency that you get in a test cycle is not necessarily borne out in reality for the added costs of maintenance, etc. For American market emissions compliance, they would require urea injection, and you'd also have to have a soot filter. And so that adds cost compared to other markets that don't have the same emissions restrictions. And my memory is bad on Australian emissions and where exactly you fall in the grand scheme of emissions there. But California and Europe and actually China as well now for their latest emission standards that I believe are going into effect next year. They're among the strictest in the world. And so it's difficult for especially larger diesel engines to really fit those profiles. Obviously, the exception in America is big diesels, because you stick it in a big truck and all of a sudden it doesn't matter.
Right. All right. So, any news on Grand Highlander or Lexus TX? This is weird because I mean, there haven't been any spy shots of either of these vehicles. I know they've been rumored for a while now.
Yeah,
the Grand Highlander wasn't on that New York document that had the crown on it. I don't know if it's this because it's not happening this year, or who knows, or maybe not be happening anymore at all. But I don't know. And a TX, even less. I don't even know.
Yeah. Let's go in order for these ones, because I think these we can add, we can take off quickly. So best traction for snow states. Let's see here. Subaru, Honda Passport, Pilot, MDX. None of those have a true center differential. So just FYI. They all have a multi-plate clutch setup. So as far as snow traction goes, they're all going to be roughly similar, with the Honda products being slightly better because the rear differential basically has a limited slip functionality. Here, tires are your thing. So any of these vehicles would be better than the others if you put good tires on them. A Subaru, a front-wheel drive Chrysler Pacifica with Blizzaks on it is going to handle in neutral handling better and stop shorter than any of those with all seasons on it. And depending on the situation, they may have better traction in starting from a stop as well. So tires are always your friend there. Here's a good one though. Cheapest electric car that handle extreme cold climate. Heat pumps are your friend. Let's see. The Kona EV has a heat pump option. Am I correct?
That is a good question. I know in terms of like the newer, like the EV6 and Ioniq 5, only the EV6 has it. The Ioniq 5 does not, correct?
No, with all-wheel drive, they both have it.
They both do. Okay.
But only with all-wheel drive.
The rear-wheel drive, it's just Kia.
Right.
Or neither of them.
Rear-wheel drive is resistive element heating only. Heat pumps only in the all-wheel drive model for both.
Okay.
But yeah. Mach-E, no heat pump at all. Teslas would be just fine because they have heat pumps in their latest versions, and Tesla has really good battery temperature management software. So the battery pack temperature when stopped and idle, etc., is going to be more consistent for what you might want in a Tesla, I would say, than most of the competition. Although the Hyundai Kia vehicles definitely do a lot of battery temperature management as well. But look for an EV with the heat pump. There was a lot of really misquoted data and misspoken stuff about heat pumps for some reason. And I blame not necessarily directly Tesla, but the Tesla faithful did this for a long time. Oh, heat pumps are bad. You don't want heat pumps in EVs, until there was a heat pump in a Tesla. And then all of a sudden, heat pumps were the next best thing. They've always been the next best thing. Even if temperatures get below 0 Fahrenheit, which is pretty cold. Remember, 32 degrees is freezing in Fahrenheit. 0 is way below freezing. A heat pump is always going to be more efficient than a resist development heater, because it's not making new heat, it's moving heat.
Right.
And above 30 degrees or around 30 degrees, they're going to be more than 400% efficient for the average heat pump system. So the amount of range that you lose is drastically lower if your EV has a heat pump. And most of the new ones do.
Yeah. And does the Ionic, I'm guessing Matthew here is asking about the regular one, not the actual Ionic 5, but the original, like I guess Kia Niro Ionic hatchback thing, the old one. Do those have it?
That is a good question. I believe in some markets they did. I know that the original Kia Soul had a heat pump. That was where they first started. Looks like, yes, it was available. Exactly which models had it, I don't know. But Hyundai and Kia have flirted with heat pumps for quite some time. And it's logical that Hyundai did this for two reasons. The first one is Hyundai makes heat pumps for homes. Because remember, Hyundai makes everything. So they part of their lineup is appliances in Korea. They make all sorts of appliances. And so they were well versed in heat pump technology. And so they were able to adapt it to a car system early, and then they tinkered with it, making it available in this EV and that whatever. So like the original Soul back in 2016 had a heat pump in it. And that was where I was first convinced that, heat pumps are a jolly good thing to have, because they use very little electricity. And it's funny because Americans have had a very different experience with heat pumps than places outside of the United States. There was a flirtation with heat pumps in the 1980s historically, and a lot of installers didn't know what they were doing and didn't know what to do, and so they were undersized for people's homes, and people complained about them. They thought they weren't good. And modern heat pump systems also have systems aside from additional systems to help low weather performance as well. So a lot of those limitations that people assumed they had just aren't realistic in the 21st century. I heat my home with a heat pump, and it is just fine. And I do it for the same reason that you want a heat pump in an electric car, because they use less electricity. I live off the grid. My heating is powered by electricity. So I am very interested in making sure that my heating is as efficient as it possibly can be. And that's exactly what you want in an EV.
All right. Let's see. I feel like we've had this question before, but really quickly, my answer changed. It used to be EV6, but now it's Ionic 5. Only because I've sat in both of them. I haven't driven both of them yet, but the feel of the Ionic 5 felt a little bit, I don't know, a little bit more put together and more modern. The EV6 is more traditional. If you like a more traditional interior feel, that's the one to go to. The Ionic 5 is more like Art Deco chic with some more flexibility with everything inside. And I just think the exterior design is just so much, I don't know, just so sharp and cool and retro and futuristic at the same time. That's my pick.
Tricky. I would probably get the EV6 for the style, but the Ionic if you wanted the room. The extra style and the extra range on the EV6, which is better, is at the expense of interior room, because they reshaped it to make it more aerodynamic, and so you lose some space inside.
Yeah.
When it's below 0, will the heat pump defrost a windshield? Yes, it definitely will. So that's one thing to keep in mind there. Let's see here. This is an interesting one, though. I am also wondering about Infiniti's EVs and their plug-in hybrid things and their serial hybrid things, because it just doesn't seem like the best idea in one respect. And this is also going to apply to the CX-30 or MX-30 with the range extender.
The rotary range extender.
Yeah, the rotary range extender. So two things. I wonder if they're ever going to actually happen. There's a lot of talk about Infiniti's is it e-power, 4 power e, something like that? Because the Nissan, they've been advertising it in Nissan vehicles and Infiniti vehicles for quite some time. I've been shown prototypes of them. We've had presentations of them. We've never actually seen one roll down the road. Remember that serial hybrids are not efficient. This is my big point here why I think they might never happen. The reason serial hybrids aren't efficient is because generating electricity, there are losses involved, and then you shuttle the electricity off to somewhere else. Now you've converted it to DC to charge a battery. Now you've got to reinvert it to power the vehicle down the road. This is not an efficient way to move power around. And this is the reason that the Chevy Volt was never the greatest in efficiency. It was a bad compromise. Sitting right on the fence like that is the worst of both worlds. And the Prius is far more efficient, which is also why the next generation Chevy Volt spent so little time in serial hybrid mode. Most of the time was in parallel hybrid mode because it's just more efficient. And the design supposedly of the EV and the Mazda hybrids is that there is no parallel hybrid mode. It's only serial. So we don't know. Like the i3, if you recall, with the range extender, not overly efficient when it's running in its range extending mode. It's like 30 mpg-ish. And you'd assume that something so tiny and so underwhelming power-wise with a 2-cylinder motorcycle engine should have been 40. And no, when its range extender was running, like a Nissan Versa was better. E-Force, there we go. That's what it's called. It was called E-Force.
With a 4.
Yeah, with a 4. That's what it was. So I'm intrigued to see them in person. I want to know if they're a good idea or not. If it's a backup plan, like the i3 did not offend me at all. I thought the fuel efficiency was fine because it's supposed to be the backup plan. And and you could get 100 miles regular, extra 100 miles on the backup plan. And at that point, you're like, well, efficiency doesn't matter because it's just the backup plan. But if you're popping this in an Infiniti and marketing it at someone as a plug-in hybrid thing, that I wonder about. I don't know.
How do you feel about it? The slow demise of gas vehicles as we sluggishly convert to all electric.
I think this is a good way to put it because, I mean, the reality is this is not going to be an overnight transition. And I think there was someone earlier that was complaining about the infrastructure not being able to handle it, et cetera. I mean, the reality is the infrastructure will adapt. Someone was mentioning Jason Fensky earlier. We've had long conversations about this, and we are on the same page here. The EV adoption rate is so slow in America that there is no way you're ever going to get all of America to buy an EV next month, even if you could. A, we can't build them. B, you could never convince everybody to buy them. So this is just a non-starter as far as an actual valid argument against EVs. We have seen American household electricity consumption grow in this same profile in the same way before. When Americans started buying air conditioning in the South. I mean, remember, you live in Atlanta. There was a time in Atlanta where you had to be there with no air conditioning. And then all of a sudden we got air conditioning that was not efficient and everybody wanted one. And everybody's running their air conditioning in the middle of the summer. Guess what? That probably uses more power than all of the EVs in Georgia put together. All of the EVs in California put together probably use less electricity than the air conditionings in Georgia. And the grid adapted, the grid changed to adopt that change because the utility wants to make money. You start using more power, they're happy to find ways to sell you more power. I think that is the least of our concerns is as far as that goes. But the slow growth there, I think, helps that function. If it was a rapid transition, then that might be more of a valid concern. Then where the charging stations might be more of a valid concern. But the rate of adoption at the moment, I think that the need, the demand and the supply, they're approximately right for the moment.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with Matthew here. He said this earlier, but he reiterates. I feel like a lot of companies are promising a lot really fast, and then as we've seen, they're like, well, we can't get it as soon as we can't get it out to you as soon as we thought we would, or we're just not even going to tell
Wow.
you when it's going to happen because we're not even sure ourselves. So we're going to tell you like with GM, the most expensive version. We can pretty much guarantee that one's coming at a certain time, but the rest of them that are more attainable, who knows yet? We're not ready to tell you. So yeah, a lot of that's happening, but I don't
Yeah.
know. Yeah, it comes down to the infrastructure and the supply
Okay.
of the parts and the technology.
Yeah, and this is kind of a multifaceted one here. This 10 to 15 years more BEVs on the road than ICEs, that's very unlikely. The average age of the vehicle on the road currently today is about 7 to 10 years old right now, depending which metric you're going for. It's going to take a long time till the majority of vehicles on the road are battery electric vehicles, because even EVadoption.com, which is very forward thinking in their predictions, they generally have been a little bit aggressive in their predicting. They're expecting about 30% of new car sales by 2030 to be zero emissions in the US. So it's not a huge number. Obviously, that's 10 times where we are now in the US, but still not an enormous number. And then going along with that is this one, though. All new cars by 2035, supposed to be alternate fuel in California. I would caution everybody on this one that remember California and the ZEV mandates in any other state, Europe, federal ZEV requirements, etc. These are credit systems. So remember that according to the credit system in California, if you have a plug-in hybrid, it's a zero emissions vehicle. If you have a hybrid, it is a fraction of a zero emissions vehicle. And if you have a full battery electric vehicle or a hydrogen vehicle, you're actually driving multiple zero emissions vehicles. So the way that you get to a 100% number in the legislation is not by actually selling all zero emissions vehicles. It's by having some sales mix of things to cover the other things that you're selling, which is why Toyota is absolutely not worried about zero emissions vehicle sales in California, because they're already perfectly in compliance with the next tiers of regulation here, because they sell so many hybrids, a few plug-in hybrids, and maybe a little bit of battery electric vehicle coming soon, some hydrogen things here and there. They have more than enough credits to cover them for their ZEV requirements at the moment. That's something that's not widely understood, which is also why the i3 range extender exists, and why I suspect that the CX or MX-30 rather is going to be a range extending EV in California, because if it is, then it qualifies for the same multiple credit system as a regular battery electric vehicle. If it's a plug-in hybrid, it qualifies for a certain number of credits. It's like, I think it's 5. But if it's a battery electric vehicle, you get 7 credits. And if it's a battery electric vehicle range extender, you still get the 7 credits, even though it burns gasoline. The requirement there is that the gasoline range has to be lower than the electric range. Mm-hmm. So expect tiny gas tank in the MX-30 if they want the biggest credit available. If they're willing to give away some credits, they could stick a bigger gas tank in it. But that's why the American market BMW i3 range extender had a smaller gas tank than Europe, because in order to get the full credit, they had to stick a smaller tank on it.
Very interesting behind the scenes info there that I didn't know.
Yeah, it's a legislation there is credit system is a really weird way of doing that. So it's going to be an interesting test to see how that really all goes.
Right.
Let's see here. What last question should we have here? Because I think we're ending the time for our broadcast to be over.
All righty, let's see.
Ooh, can we expect a Silverado hybrid? Probably not.
Yeah, the EV is all you're gonna get, I think.
Yeah. GM has definitely said that they're going in that direction there.
Yeah.
So what is your last question here that you want to pick on here?
I'm looking. That's a good one, I think. I think that's definitely a smart move. They're both very good options. In terms of, I can speak on in terms of the cars themselves and the features and all that. I think they're very close. There are certain things that one has that the other doesn't, and certain aspects of them that are a little bit different, but otherwise driving dynamics and everything very similar. Fuel economy pretty much the same. For me, I like the tech in the Palisade a little bit more. You can get a couple more things like the digital instrument cluster, like the full LCD one. I think a couple of things like power folding third row seats, if that's a thing for you, if that's an issue. A couple of things like that the Telluride doesn't get. They're both about to be refreshed for 23, so
Right. And you could bet that the LCD cluster is going to happen in the Telluride for 23.
there's a good chance, yeah. Because like, why not? The
Yeah, it's
Sorento
happening in everything else, so it's
yeah.
coming. It's coming.
Yeah.
For
So, but in terms of reliability and warranty, they're both 10-year warranties,
Mhm.
I believe.
Warranty's the same. Yeah.
Reliability,
They're so mechanically similar; they should be identical as well.
yeah, and they're not doing too. There was that one weird thing with the leather and the Palisade smelling weird, but I don't know about
Yeah.
other stuff in terms of anything glaring with them.
Mhm. They're not currently built in the same factory.
That's
Hyundai
true.
and Kia have shared a factory in the past, but with Kia's sales volume going up, Kia kicked Hyundai out.
Yeah.
And so the Telluride is now built there exclusively.
Up here in Georgia.
Rather than because before there was, I think, the Santa Fe or Santa Fe Sports, something that was built in the same factory there as Sorento, but now it got kicked to the curb. So reliability should be identical between the two. I like the styling of the Telluride a little bit better. Seat comfort wise, they're pretty similar, and I prefer the non-powered third row seat. So it depends on your personal preference. My complaint about power third row seats is that they're slow. Nobody is that swift.
Right.
And I can always just grab the seat and pull it up. I was reminded though that if you are short, then that can be a problem. So if you're, it depends on your height. So if you're, a 4'5" woman versus a 6 foot tall man, then this calculus changes. If you want to be able to pull the seat up without, with stuff in your hands, then a powered seat could be handy. But for me, I have figured out that I'm always impatient. I sit in there, press the button. I'm like, why is the seat not down? I could have done this myself now.
Right.
So that's my speed.
Yeah, and you can probably expect that refresh to get the X Pro off-roady version. I mean, you can already get an X. Well, actually, no, you can't get an X line Telluride yet, but I imagine they'll bring that to the Telluride for the refresh, and then the X Pro, which the new Sportage gets, which has like beefier tires, but not too much else mechanically updated. But if you like the rugged aspect, that'll be the choice too.
This is an interesting one. Honda reliability has been a little iffy. So it would depend on which Pilot you have. If you have a Pilot with the 9-speed, well, actually Honda 6-speed has been a problem too. But if you have a Honda Pilot, transmission worries would be the main worry for me long term. Honda has had some stumbles there. And I would say when you actually look at the metrics, the Pilot has often ridden on Honda's or on Toyota's coattails for reliability reputation, as has Nissan, to be perfectly honest. So consumer opinion generally puts, for some reason, Honda and Toyota as co-equals in reliability, and Nissan a close third, which is not borne out by actual data. Hondas generally tend to be lower than Toyota, depending on the reliability metric and the model that you're looking at. So reliability rating wise, Pilot is somewhat middle of the pack, depending on the year. In Consumer Reports, it has actually year to year been rated below the Dodge Durango. Go figure. So reliability wise, I would probably bet on the Telluride or Palisade actually being more reliable long term. Every manufacturer can have their stumbles. Toyota's had recalls, Honda's had recalls. There's been a recent recall for some Hyundai Kia products for fire risk, etc. Nothing's actually burnt to a crisp. So apparently it was based on internal testing data and they were worried about it. So there's a recall for that. Honda had a recall of 1.8 million vehicles for fire risk, I think a year or two ago as well. So it happens on every front. But looking at the data, if I were a betting person, I would actually say that a new 2022 Telluride or Palisade over the same time period is probably going to have fewer problems than your 2018 Pilot over that same time period, if that makes sense. Reliability numbers are a little unsure on Honda's new 10-speed automatic transmission. If I were a betting person, I would put their new 10-speed likely statistically a little bit below the average new transmission for 2022. Let's see here. Yeah, just there we go. Yeah, 100% point. Yeah, twice injectors. So, every car can have an issue. Honda's track record here has not been the worst, but it's not been above average either. If I were to bet on a brand new product from a new brand, the safest bet's always going to be Toyota and Lexus. They can have stumbles too with reliability, but if you're looking into the crystal ball, that would be my crystal ball assumption would be that Toyota would be the leader in reliability. But honestly, generally, the Koreans and the Americans fall in there in the middle at some point or another, with the Europeans generally pulling up the rear end. So reliability wise, bet on Toyota first. Some of the Americans and the Koreans a close second, with Honda possibly in there depending on the model. And then next, the rest of the Americans and Honda and Nissan towards the lower end there. It just depends on which area you're looking at. Honda had a really great run initially with their 1.5 liter turbo. Then there were a lot of concerns with oil dilution. And the net result of that is Honda said it's a feature, not a bug. And so it really just depends on your experience, your drive style, etc., where you end up here.
Exactly.
Yep.
Alrighty.
All right. So with that, we will end the live show. I encourage you all to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. And of course, be sure and let us know what dates and times you think live shows should be on. We've tried to experiment here with different times and dates. So, maybe a late night Wednesday is the ideal for everybody. Maybe it's early morning Saturday. Let us know down there in the comment section, and we will try and see if we can adjust that for the next one. With all that out of the way, I guess we'll see all of you later.
Bye, everyone.